In a land groaning under the weight of Philistine oppression, the seeds of deliverance were sown not on a battlefield, but in the quiet heart of a barren woman. In a sunlit field in Zorah, a woman, the wife of Manoah from the tribe of Dan, went about her day. Suddenly, a light, more brilliant than the midday sun, pierced the air. A figure stood before her, an angel of the Lord, his presence both terrifying and magnificent. Her initial shock gave way to a profound sense of awe as he spoke, his voice like the rushing of waters. He brought a message that would shatter the quiet despair of her childless life. She would conceive and bear a son. This was not just a promise of a child, but the promise of a nation's hope. The celestial messenger laid out a sacred path for the child to be. He was to be a Nazirite, consecrated to God from the moment of his birth. The vow was absolute and its conditions severe. She herself was to abstain from wine, strong drink, and any unclean food during her pregnancy. Most crucial of all, the angel declared, "No razor shall come upon his head." This child, to be named Samson, was chosen for a singular, divine purpose. His uncut hair would be the symbol of his covenant with God, the very source of a strength unlike any seen before. Through him, God would begin the great work of delivering Israel from the iron grip of the Philistines. The weight of this destiny, spoken into the quiet field, was immense. Overwhelmed and elated, Manoah's wife ran home, her heart pounding with the impossible news. She found her husband and recounted every detail of the miraculous encounter, describing the man of God, whose face was like that of an angel, awesome and unknowable. Manoah, a man of faith yet grounded in the reality of their long-standing sorrow, listened with a mixture of hope and cautious disbelief. Wanting to be certain, to understand how they were to raise this promised child, he fell to his knees. He prayed with desperate fervency, pleading with God to send the divine messenger a second time, to guide their hands and hearts in fulfilling this sacred trust. God heard his prayer. As his wife sat once again in the field, the angel reappeared. She quickly fetched Manoah, who, upon seeing the figure, respectfully asked, "Are you the man who spoke to my wife?" After the angel confirmed his identity and repeated the instructions, Manoah, full of gratitude, pressed him to stay for a meal. The angel refused but instructed him to prepare a burnt offering to the Lord. Manoah took a young goat and a grain offering and placed them upon a large rock. As he lit the sacrifice, a breathtaking miracle unfolded. The flames leaped toward the heavens, and within that pillar of fire, the angel of the Lord ascended, disappearing from their sight. Overcome with terror and wonder, Manoah and his wife fell prostrate on the ground, finally understanding they had been in the very presence of God's messenger. The promise was fulfilled. A son, Samson, was born, and the Lord blessed him. While playing with other children, his laughter would carry a hint of thunder, and games of strength would end with displays of power that left others speechless and amazed. We see glimpses of his unnatural might, lifting stones no man could budge, outrunning the swiftest youths with ease. The video concludes with a vision of a young Samson, now on the cusp of manhood, standing alone in the fields near the camp of Dan. A breeze rustles his long, dark hair as a new and powerful feeling stirs within him. For the first time, he feels the Spirit of the Lord, a divine fire igniting his soul. His gaze is fixed, resolute, looking out toward the lands of the Philistines, the future of his people resting on his shoulders. Samson, now a powerful young man, journeyed to the Philistine city of Timnah. It was there that his eyes fell upon a local woman, and he was immediately captivated. He returned to his Israelite home not with stories of his travels, but with a startling demand for his parents. "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." His parents were deeply troubled. They pleaded with him, questioning why he would seek a wife from among the uncircumcised Philistines, their oppressors, instead of from his own people. "Get her for me," he insisted. "She's the right one for me." Little did they know that this seemingly reckless choice was part of a divine plan, a way for the Lord to create an opportunity against the Philistines. As Samson traveled back toward Timnah to see the woman again, a sudden and terrifying danger emerged from the vineyards. A young, roaring lion charged directly at him. In that moment, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon Samson with incredible power. He faced the ferocious beast not with a weapon, but with his bare hands, and he tore the lion apart as one might tear a young goat. He didn't even mention this astonishing feat to his parents. Sometime later, on his way to the wedding, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. He was amazed to find a swarm of bees and a bounty of honey inside the dried-out remains. He scooped some of the honey into his hands and ate it as he walked, sharing some with his parents without revealing its strange origin. The wedding celebration began, a grand feast lasting 7 days, as was the custom. "Let me tell you a riddle," he announced. "If you can solve it within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothing. But if you can't, you will give me the same." Samson then posed his puzzle, born from his secret encounter. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, the Philistine companions were completely baffled, unable to decipher its meaning. Their frustration soon turned to sinister threats. On the 4th day, they cornered Samson's new wife. "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us," they demanded menacingly, "or we will burn you and your father's household to the ground." Terrified, she went to Samson, using tears and emotional pleas as her weapons. "You hate me. You don't really love me," she cried day after day. "You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." Samson resisted, explaining that he hadn't even told his own parents. But her constant weeping wore him down. Finally, on the 7th and final day of the feast, pressured by her distress, he relented and told her the secret of the lion and the honey. She immediately went and revealed the answer to her people. Just before sunset on the last day, the companions came to Samson with an air of triumph. They declared, "What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion?" Samson knew instantly that he had been betrayed. A burning rage filled him as the Spirit of the Lord once again came upon him with force. He threw the garments at the feet of those who had solved his riddle, a debt paid in blood and betrayal. Consumed by his fury, he left the feast and returned to his father's house. The story ends on a note of deep personal loss. His bride, the woman who had coaxed his secret from him, was given away to the man who had been his best man at the wedding. This act of treachery was the spark that ignited a long and brutal conflict. It turned a personal grievance into a one-man war, demonstrating how Samson's immense strength was tragically matched by his vulnerability to deception. Today, we delve into the escalating cycle of vengeance between Samson and the Philistines, a conflict that would drench the land in blood and showcase the raw, untamed power of God's chosen Nazarite. Enraged that his wife had been given away to his best man, Samson's grief twisted into a fiery thirst for revenge. He didn't just seek an eye for an eye. He sought to cripple his enemies where it hurt most, their livelihood. In an act of cunning and brute force, he captured 300 foxes. Can you imagine the sheer effort? He then tied them together in pairs, tail to tail, with a lit torch fastened between each duo. As night fell, he unleashed this living inferno into the Philistines' ready-to-harvest grain fields. The flames spread rapidly, consuming not just the wheat and barley, but also their precious vineyards and ancient olive groves. It was a calculated act of agricultural warfare, a devastating blow that left the Philistines' economy in ashes and their hearts burning with hatred. The Philistines' retaliation was as swift as it was brutal. Instead of directing their anger at Samson himself, they sought a softer target. They went to Timnah and seized Samson's former wife and her father, the very people who had wronged him. In a horrifying act of collective punishment, they burned them alive, believing this would appease Samson and end the conflict. They were wrong. This barbarity only fueled Samson's rage to an unimaginable degree. He fell upon them in a bloody frenzy, declaring, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I've taken my revenge on you." The Philistine lords would not let this stand. The men of Judah, caught between a rock and a hard place, were terrified. 3,000 of them went to Samson's hideout, not to fight alongside their kinsmen, but to betray him. "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us?" they pleaded. "What have you done to us?" Fearing for their families and their land, they convinced Samson to surrender. Displaying a strange submission, Samson agreed, on the condition that they would not harm him themselves. As they brought him to the Philistine camp at Lehi, a roar of triumph erupted from the soldiers. They saw a bound, defeated man. But in that very moment, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon Samson with overwhelming power. The two new ropes on his arms became like flax that had caught fire. They simply melted away from his hands. His eyes scanned the ground and fell upon the fresh jawbone of a donkey, a crude, unlikely weapon. Seizing it, he became an unstoppable force of destruction. He swung the bone with divine fury, cutting down Philistine soldiers left and right. One man against an army. When the dust settled, 1,000 men lay dead at his feet. Standing alone amidst the carnage, Samson proclaimed his victory with a triumphant cry. But the exertion had taken its toll. He was exhausted and on the verge of dying from a desperate thirst. In his moment of weakness, he cried out not in pride, but in desperation to the God who had empowered him. "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" In a stunning act of mercy, God split open a hollow place in the rock, and water gushed out. Samson drank, his strength was restored, and his spirit revived. He had been brought to the brink, only to be saved by the very hand that gave him his strength. And so, Samson's one-man war continued, a saga of divine power channeled through a flawed and volatile vessel. His story is a stark reminder that God's plans can be fulfilled through the most unlikely and imperfect of people. Samson, the champion of Israel, a man whose strength was a legend whispered by his enemies, fell deeply in love with a woman named Delilah. His passion for her was as mighty as his physical power, a blinding force that would ultimately lead to his ruin. The lords of the Philistines, Samson's sworn enemies, saw this infatuation not as a romance, but as a strategic opening. They approached Delilah with a proposition dripping in treachery and silver. Entice him, they urged, and find out where his great strength lies. For this betrayal, each of the 5 lords promised her 1,100 pieces of silver, a fortune that could buy kingdoms, but would cost a hero his freedom and his sight. The trap was set, baited with love and greed. Delilah began her insidious work, her words sweet as honey but laced with poison. "Tell me the secret of your great strength," she cooed, night after night. Samson, perhaps amused by her persistence or blinded by his affection, played along with a dangerous game of deception. First, he told her that if he were tied with 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, he would become as weak as any other man. Delilah did as he said, binding him as he slept. But when she cried out that the Philistines were upon him, he snapped the bowstrings as if they were threads scorched by fire. Undeterred, she tried again, her pleas now tinged with reproach. He then told her that new ropes, never used, would be his undoing. Once more, she bound him, and once more, he broke free with contemptuous ease. Her third attempt came after he offered another lie. If she were to weave the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric on her loom, his strength would be contained. She did so, tightening it with a pin, but he awoke and tore the entire loom from its place, his power undiminished. The game turned sour that Delilah's playful seductions gave way to emotional blackmail and incessant nagging. "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me?" She wept, pressing him daily until his soul was vexed to the point of death. Worn down, exhausted, and desperate to prove a love that was being used against him, Samson finally surrendered his sacred truth. He confessed everything. He was a Nazirite, set apart for God from birth. No razor had ever touched his head, for his long hair was the symbol of his vow and the conduit of his divine strength. If his head were shaved, his strength would leave him, and he would become as weak as any other mortal. He had given her the key to his very soul, and she knew, this time, it was not a lie. With the fatal secret in her possession, Delilah's betrayal was swift and absolute. She lulled Samson to sleep, his head resting trustingly upon her lap. Then, she signaled for a Philistine conspirator to enter. The man took a razor and methodically shaved off the 7 braids of Samson's hair. His covenant with God was broken. As the last lock of hair fell to the floor, Delilah shook him awake with the now familiar cry, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He rose, intending to shake them off as he had done before, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. The supernatural power was gone. He was just a man, vulnerable and alone. His enemies showed no mercy. The Philistines seized him, and in a brutal act of humiliation, they gouged out his eyes. The man who had once torn a lion apart with his bare hands was now a blinded, powerless captive. They led him in chains to Gaza, the very city whose gates he had once carried away in a show of mockery. There, in the dimness of a prison, the champion of Israel was forced into the life of a slave, endlessly turning a heavy millstone to grind grain. The scene is one of utter despair. The fallen hero, shorn of his glory and his sight, reduced to repetitive, menial labor. Yet, in that darkness, a quiet, almost imperceptible change began. Unnoticed by his captors, his hair, the symbol of his broken vow, slowly started to grow back. The rulers and their people had gathered in the colossal temple of their god, Dagon, to offer a great sacrifice. Joy and triumph echoed through the stone halls, a jubilant festival to honor the capture of their most feared enemy, Samson. The temple was packed to its limits, a sea of humanity celebrating their perceived victory. On the roof alone, about 3,000 men and women had assembled, their voices joining the thunderous chorus below, all eager to witness the humiliation of the man who had once terrorized their nation. The air was thick with the smell of incense and roasting meat, a feast to commemorate the downfall of Israel's champion. Amidst the revelry, a command was given to bring the prisoner from his dark cell. To heighten their entertainment and revel in their dominance, the Philistines brought out the blind Samson. Stripped of his legendary strength and sight, he was led into the center of the temple, a broken figure meant to be an object of their sport. They mocked his former power, ridiculing the man who had torn a lion apart with his bare hands and slain 1,000 of their men with the jawbone of a donkey. He was made a spectacle, a trophy of their god's supposed supremacy, paraded before them to their cruel delight. As the mockery continued, Samson, guided by a young servant, made a simple, final request. He leaned toward the boy and whispered, "Position me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so I may lean against them." His voice, though weary, held a deep resolve that went unnoticed by the raucous crowd. The servant, perhaps out of pity or simple obedience, obliged the blind man's wish. He led Samson through the throng of mockers to the very heart of the structure, placing his hands upon the two central pillars that bore the immense weight of the entire temple and the thousands of people upon its roof. With his hands firmly on the cold, massive stones, Samson bowed his head and prayed to God one last time. His prayer was not for escape or for his life, but for a final, divine surge of power. "Sovereign Lord, remember me," he implored, his voice a low, intense murmur amidst the din. "Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." In that moment, he wasn't just a prisoner. He was an instrument of judgment, calling upon the source of his original strength for one last act of vengeance and redemption. His entire being focused on this singular, desperate plea. Feeling a supernatural power surge through his muscles, Samson braced himself, placing his right hand on one pillar and his left on the other. He took a deep breath, the noise of the Philistines fading into a distant roar. Then, with a final, earth-shattering cry, "Let me die with the Philistines," he pushed with all his might. The great pillars groaned and then splintered under the impossible force. The foundation gave way, and the massive stone roof came crashing down in a torrent of death and destruction. The temple collapsed, instantly killing the rulers and every person within its walls. In this ultimate act of sacrifice, Samson's legacy was sealed, for the number he killed at his death was far greater than all those he had slain during his tumultuous life.